You're a target if you have critical and sensitive data for hackers to monetize you in ways you don't want to be. Phishing attacks are those nuisance, anxiety-provoking emails you get in your inbox. You go, I want to click, but something tells me I shouldn't, but I'm not sure what I need to do. That's what my company was founded to help you learn, right? CyberHoot teaches cyber literacy skills around spotting and avoiding phishing attacks.
I passed the phishing test.
That's good. That's great. That's fantastic that you did. I'm as old as dirt, and before the internet even existed, I was doing this stuff.
Pre-cable days, pre-DSL days, I mean, all you saw was loading.
There's 750,000 unfilled jobs in cybersecurity in the United States alone, and about 4 million internationally. If you have a love of computers and you want to make cybersecurity your career, the easiest way is to go to school for it. Get a 4-year degree. When you get started there, guess what? Your salary is not going to be $35,000. It's going to be $60,000, $70,000. But I will give you this tip for anyone listening to this that wants to get into cybersecurity.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Umair Sheikh with the My Career Shop podcast. Today with me, I have a certified information system security professional and the co-founder of CyberHoot to discuss the career of cybersecurity. CyberHoot is a company dedicated to teaching cyber literacy skills. And Craig here, over the course of his career, has led cybersecurity organizations in the web hosting industry, finance industry, manufacturing industry at many large corporations such as Vistaprint, JP Morgan, Neoscope, and more. He currently leads a cybersecurity consulting practice where him and his team of many other cybersecurity professionals, they act as consultants and provide their virtual cybersecurity information security officers to more than 40 companies. Craig himself has a degree in psychology, and he's very well versed in the field of cybersecurity over the past multiple decades. Very excited to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Umair. Really good to be here.
Yeah, I mean, he flew in, so I'm very appreciative of you taking the time and making the business trip to discuss and advocate for the profession of cybersecurity, which is booming.
It is.
And so I'm here located in Virginia, and Virginia is uniquely situated for lots of cybersecurity jobs.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So
you've got the NSA nearby. You've got Falls Church is a hotbed of cybersecurity firms working with the government and defense. There's all kinds of opportunities in this area.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the main reasons I really wanted to discuss this profession, because cybersecurity is an odd field in that it's not formulaic. Right? You know, if you go into a field with licensure requirements, it's very simple. You go on a website, get a bachelor's, go into this next postgraduate program, and you write a bunch of exams, get a license, bam. Cybersecurity is not like that. And yet, cybersecurity actually has lots of opportunities with people making six figures. So I'm very, very excited. But start me off, I want to go very basic. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a professional in this industry. What is a cybersecurity professional?
So it may be a little simpler than you might think, because cybersecurity professionals, there are many subspecialties in our field of study, no different than law or medicine, where you have podiatry is a different doctor from cardiology, or law, you study international law, you study civil or criminal. There are those same specialties developed in cybersecurity. You can do forensics, which is looking at after an incident, what happened? How did they get in? You can look at program development. How do you build a cyber program at a company to protect their data? You can do vulnerability scanning, which is another area where you can, interrogate the network and the systems that are protecting the data that a company has. So there are many specialties within cybersecurity. They all lend themselves to really good salaries and uniqueness. But at the core of cybersecurity is data. It's all about the data. If you have no data, hackers aren't going to go after you unless you have lots of cash, but then they have no way to extort you, because the way they extort you when they attack your company by encrypting your data or stealing it, exfiltrating is the fancy word for they just borrow that data. They make copies of it and they threaten you to release that privileged information to the internet, which could embarrass your company It could also impact the identity theft of individuals that you might have privileged information about, right? Your full name, your date of birth, your social security number. All of those things are considered something called non-public personal information. Hackers are after that info because they can monetize it. And if you have that sort of data in your company, there's a bullseye on you trying to steal it or break in and steal that data.
So a cybersecurity professional essentially protects you from that.
Cybersecurity professional is designed to solve some problem relating to protecting your data. And it can be before, during, after. There's a whole area of cybersecurity that investigates incidents. So it's an incident handler. I happen to have the certification, GIAC certification, GIAC. It's long since expired, but 15 years ago, I got certified as an incident handler. You don't forget the skills, especially when you're a VCISO, and you practice it by managing incidents for multiple companies over time. So I've been on all kinds of recent incidents to manage the recovery from a cybersecurity event, to minimize the damage, to understand what and how much data was stolen or compromised, and put practices in place after the fact to ensure it never happens again. So all of these things are part of the cybersecurity realm of responsibility, certainly for a VCISO. Someone starting out might not get right into this kind of a role, though. You need a large body of knowledge to become a virtual CISO. And I think you're going to get into some of these great questions for someone that might be looking to start out in cybersecurity. We can talk about that in a moment.
Yeah. I mean, you just started with CISO.
That's CISO.
Yeah, so that's
Chief Information Security Officer.
Okay.
Yep.
What are some other common titles in the field, and especially somebody that's starting off?
An analyst.
Okay.
Most people that are starting off, maybe without a degree, you're going to want to get into the field by studying networking, right? Bits. How do you get data from one place to another? That's done over TCP/IP. In the old days, there were other protocols that we could talk about, but I don't want to bore people because I'm as old as dirt. And before the internet even existed, I was doing this stuff. So, on local area networks with NetWare and Token Ring and BNC connectors, stuff that no one, unless you go into the archives of the internet, you'll never really learn what that is or need to know. But everything is TCP/IP today. So getting started, you might become an analyst and monitor networks at SOC, a Security Operations Center. It's a great way to get started because there's a lot of time spent looking at screens for indicators of an attack, and you have to start to piece together TCP/IP and how does it work, right? There's all kinds of different forms of attack that you would need to become familiar with as a SOC analyst. Is it a denial of service attack? That's where someone tries to overwhelm the resources of your network, your website, your computer to deny service. It's a DOS attack. Then there's something above that called a distributed denial of service attack. That's where multiple origins on the internet are all doing the same thing. It's called a distributed because there's more data flowing into your network, computer, website to prevent service. That's a DDoS attack. And then what are the protections against that? That's just one avenue of it, right? Another is phishing attacks, right? Phishing attacks are those nuisance, anxiety-provoking emails you get in your inbox. You go, I want to click, but something tells me I shouldn't, but I'm not sure what I need to do. That's what my company was founded to help you learn, right? CyberHoot teaches cyber literacy skills around spotting and avoiding phishing attacks. So there's lots of different areas that someone could get started in, but a SOC is a great area. But there are degree programs too now. When I started, there was no cybersecurity degree. There were, some military people doing it for nation states. There was a lot of companies. Look, my first argument, I got started in a firewall vendor 25 years ago, before there was a World Wide Web in 1996. And no, that's 30 years ago almost, right? Oh, geez. But we were convincing companies, when you plug into this thing called the internet, there wasn't a World Wide Web yet. But when you plug in, mostly universities were communicating via text-based email, like on terminals. Remember dial-up? You probably don't know
No,
that too.
I
You
know.
stick a phone on a terminal and it does a bunch of noisiness and then it connects. And
I'm glad you think I'm that young, Greg. But
Umair, come on, you're 35 at most.
yeah, but hey, 35 years ago, I I have a picture of me playing with the old computers with just the green lines and like that
Okay.
hunky computer
A
that
terminal.
yeah,
Yeah,
the monster behemoth of what we call a desktop now.
sure.
So I mean, I saw that. I saw the Walkman. I saw even the
Oh,
cassette.
okay. All right.
I saw dial up. I saw the whole AOL thing. I mean, people today. I mean, anyone that was born after 19. I guess if you were five by the time you were 2000, you missed all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're born 95 after that, internet was decent by then
Mm-hmm.
because I think we had cable by 2000, right?
Yeah.
Pre-cable days, pre-DSL days, I mean, all you saw was loading. And I mean, all you could do was send emails and there was no Google. So I saw Ask Jeeves. I saw all of that.
Oh, sure.
So
Dogpile,
yeah,
Ask Jeeves. There was Alta Vista. There were some really lame search engines. Yahoo
yeah,
had a search engine.
yeah.
I don't want to say bad things about any company, but their search was difficult back then.
Yeah. I mean, Ask Jeeves, I remember when it came out, I was so happy. We're just like, ask this thing anything, man. It'll
Yeah.
just tell you. And so, I mean, I'm also from that time where our initial inquiry started in an encyclopedia
Mm-hmm.
or the library,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so I got to experience that. And even when I went to university, 07, 6, 7-ish, we used to initially start everything in at a library. Then there was better technology for us to find that book within the library. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been there for the archaic days. But back to the question. So would you say the most common titles in the beginning are cybersecurity and analyst? Because I found security administrator, cybersecurity administrator, ISO doesn't seem like something you would start with, but I saw so many different things. Like,
Well,
is
there
there a
are
difference between an administrator, analyst?
Sure, you can be a Unix admin, you can be a Windows admin who has specialization in cybersecurity, right? What would that mean? It means that when you're provisioning a Windows machine, you're making sure that it's patched, that it doesn't have unnecessary services running, that you're following a gold standard of rolling machines out that have only the software you need and nothing extra. Any machine you get from back in the day, Gateway computers, you might not even know who they are, but Gateway would ship with all kinds of extra software installed. And they were paid by the vendors to install that software. It's called bloatware. And if you want to know what bloatware is, you can go to our website, cyberhoot.com/cybrary. We have over 1,000 terms defined that tie into cybersecurity, but in common terms, like in yours and my
So,
vernacular.
so that's cyberhoot.com/.
Cybrary, Cybrary. And in there, you can search for terms. And one of them is bloatware, and it explains what that was or is. It doesn't really happen as much now, but there are still software things that you would want to uninstall. On a Linux machine, you're less likely to get any bloatware because you're really starting from scratch. But someone that understands Linux could move into cybersecurity and be a Unix or Linux administrator. Windows is another role that gets you in. So get familiar with your operating system and then, work on provisioning machines for a company and ask, hey, could I build a gold image for this Windows machine that is more secure than like what we get shipped from the factory or from the vendor? Yeah, that would be another way to get into cybersecurity, to get started. But even in then, you need to know TCP/IP, you need to know how Wi-Fi works, you need to understand some of the attacks on these things. If you've ever heard of a man-in-the-middle attack, someone stands up a Wi-Fi network that's a hacker and claims to be free Starbucks Wi-Fi, right? And then you connect to that and they pass it along through to the internet, but along the way, they sniff all the data that's coming through the connection. So if you're on the Windows side or the Unix side, knowing TCP/IP and knowing Wi-Fi communications and different forms of attack, that's going to get you a leg up if you're sitting down with someone, you say, I want to start at the SOC. Well, what do you know about cybersecurity? Well, I've been studying TCP/IP. I know some of the common attacks. That's a great way to win that interview and win that first position in cybersecurity.
That is cool. So you would recommend somebody starting off look to become a cybersecurity analyst, or security administrator, something of that, more junior roles?
Well, it depends, Umair, because I would always recommend if you have a love of computers and you want to make cybersecurity your career, the easiest way is to go to school for it. Get a 4-year degree. There's multiple 4-year degrees now. I'm from New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, we have a great university called Norwich University. We hired an intern from Norwich who was going through that program at CyberHoot, and they were fantastic. They worked hard. In fact, he texted me the other day, wants to get together and see how we're doing and let me know how he's doing. But he went through a 4-year degree program, which didn't exist 25 years ago, but there's plenty of them now. So that's probably the best way to get started, because when you get started there, guess what? Your salary is not going to be $35,000. It's going to be $60,000, $70,000. And as you go, get experience a year or two in with a degree in cybersecurity, you're going to easily be approaching 6 figures within 5 years. Now, at 5 years, this is the critical point I need to make. Anyone listening to this, you need 5 years experience to get the de facto cybersecurity certification. In medicine, it's becoming a doctor and you're passing your MCAS. In law, it's what is it in law? The bar.
In medicine, it's MCAT gets you entry into med school.
Yep.
And then after med school, you have to write another set of, like during the entire med school process, you have to write step 1, step 2, step 3. And then after that, step 3 technically, and you're done.
You become
right?
a doctor.
You get a license.
You're a licensed doctor.
And then for lawyers, you have to finish law school and then write in the jurisdiction the bar exam for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in cybersecurity, because it's an emerging field, we allow you to sit for the CISSP, but you have to meet 2 or 3 criteria. 1, you have to be recommended by someone that is a CISSP. 2, you have to have 5 years experience, and the person recommending you has to vouch for that 5 years of experience. Okay. 3, you have to understand and study 10 domains of cybersecurity. And I'll be honest with you, I've talked to actually some lawyers and some doctors. Well, not doctors, but I know in particular one lawyer who also sat for the CISSP. He said it was almost as hard as the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. It's a 4-hour exam. And to a person that I've spoken to, they all, including myself, think we failed it miserably when we finished, because there's literally 400 questions and they're not multiple choice in some cases. You have to write some answers in. It is really tough, but it's our entry criteria for the de facto standard of a cybersecurity professional. When you want to apply to jobs that are in sort of managing or building a cyber program, if you don't have a CISSP, you're going to be ruled out in many cases.
So that was very informative. Thank you. So a CISSP that's like the professional borderline licensure designation you get in this field. So when you start off, you would be a cybersecurity analyst.
Yep.
You spend 5 years. You make sure you network because you need a recommendation from somebody.
Yep.
And then you need to write an exam which will cover 10 domains of cybersecurity. And hopefully, if you pass that, then you get the credentials CISSP, which is Certified Information System Security Professional, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But, okay, so if you get a 4-year degree, right, you still have to spend 5 years and do all the other things that we mentioned, right? Does that...
I think there's some credit given for studying cybersecurity for 4 years. Practicing it is what they want to see, 5 years of practicing it. But I'm not sure of the specifics of the CISSP. It's called ISC Squared is the organization that manages the requirements. And they may say, with a 4-year degree, you get 3 years credit of practicing it, because it's not a one-to-one relationship, but you get some credit. Then you still have to apply it. And, we've all heard of people who are book smart, but have no practical capabilities to save their lives. So you need to practice it. You need to prove that you can do it. And you mentioned about networking. There are a number of security organizations that you can join as a young cybersecurity professional or somebody that wants to get into this field. And I'm checking my phone to be sure I say it right, but ISC Squared is the International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium. So that's where you would do your CISSP through that organization. But they have chapters and meetings. There's ISACA, which is the Information Systems Audit and Control Association. That focuses on privacy. First time we mentioned that. It's a whole area of focus in cybersecurity is data privacy. How do you keep our personal, non-public personal information private? That's one. SANS is another a great institution. And I'm going to ask it, what about ISSA? That's another great one. And it's the Information Systems Security Association. Back in New Hampshire, there's a New England one that meets in Massachusetts quite often. Fantastic organization, great place to network, great place to get a job, frankly, if you're really bright and you want to do the grunt work, which is a SOC analyst. That's not glamorous, but it teaches you what you need to know to get into cybersecurity. It's kind of the grunt work. But you can meet people that say, hey, I need 10 SOC analysts today. I don't have any. Did you know that cybersecurity is one of the most underserved cybersecurity communities in the world today? It's estimated there's 750,000 unfilled jobs in cybersecurity in the United States alone, and about 4 million internationally today. And it's growing. It's so important, but to many, it seems like alchemy. It's like, I don't know how they make that. Well, if you do a little bit of research into it, it's not as complicated as you think, and you can learn it from the ground up as a SOC analyst. You can go to school for it. You can join these organizations. You can ultimately get sponsored, write your CISSP. That's going to take a lot of work. The CISSP really does test how much knowledge you have in those 10 domains, everything from encryption to, historical events. Like there was a worm that went around the internet in like 12 hours called there was MS Blaster, there was SQL Slammer, there was I Love You virus, which was a social engineering email attack. All these things. It wants you to have some very basic knowledge before you can actually pass that test. So you got a lot of studying to do to pass that. But that's basically how you would get into it. I went in by working at a firewall vendor and buying, a stack of books from the floor to about here from O'Reilly. I don't know if I think they still exist, but it was like TCP/IP 101. And then it was SMTP, which is email, but that's the protocol they use to send messages, although it's evolved a few times since then. DNS, domain name services, FTP, file transfer protocol. I can go on, but I bought all these books because the firewall vendor had to get those protocols and ports open to pass the traffic from network A to network B, but nothing else, right? It was like a gateway, a sentry to allow and deny data through from one network to another.
Yeah. So I think I'm starting to understand the profession now. Essentially, you need to understand all the ports of potential data entry, right? So they can come through many different ways. Then you need to kind of identify all the potential ways that you can get attacked or your information can leak or some adverse events in the field. And so a cybersecurity professional needs to know how to keep that information private, mitigate chances of attack, strengthen security, and all these other factors that would keep data secure, which makes sense why the job is in such high demand. Because since, I don't know, the past 15 years, I guess you can even say like 20, 25 years since the dot-com boom, companies are going online, servers, hosts, all these guys are just making these services very readily available. And so with everyone moving their businesses online, security is a huge concern. And so even in the legal field, like every single contract that I work on, it has like an entire section dedicated to information security practices, data privacy, and what are the minimum requirements. And then depending on whether you're a bank, an insurance company, a grocery company, there's different frameworks that are applicable to you based on law. And so this is a huge field and it's going to keep expanding. And I think getting into this field is definitely something that's, everyone's very concerned about AI taking your jobs away and things of that nature. So this seems like a field which, regardless of AI is going to affect every single career in some shape or form. But this seems to be a field that will be around because you need to keep data secure, right? It actually might even be a greater concern, and it's going to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. So excited because, When you hear cybersecurity, it seems overwhelming, but
Hmm.
I think and you mentioned this as well, but I think everyone needs to understand that before you become a doctor, right? You had to take biology, you had to take microbiome, you had to take biochem, you had to take 100 different courses before you become a lawyer. You had to take the Tor course on tort, contract, wills and estate, IP, whatever. And so, I mean, everything is kind of progressive,
Hmm.
and you will learn. So, I don't think anyone should be overwhelmed. But back to this, I want to carve out, based on what you've told me, please correct me where I'm wrong,
Okay.
right? So you can enter the field with no degree, right? You can apply as a cybersecurity analyst, right? Work as 5 years, get the recommendation, 10 domains of cybersecurity that you'll study and write on, and then you would get that designation, and then you'll flourish in your field. And you can do that without any technical degree or certificate, correct?
Generally speaking, yes, but you do have to have technical knowledge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But you
yeah.
don't have to have a degree that proves it.
Yes. And then the other route is you can get a 4-year degree,
Hmm.
and then it's going to be easier for you to get a job. You'll probably start at a slightly higher salary. You still have to, so would you say that it's smart? Suppose I'm going to UVA, right? And they have a
Hmm.
cybersecurity program. I contact governing body and ask them how many years it will match or take away from the 5-year requirement.
Yeah, you would go to ISC squared and say, I'm getting a degree. Do you credit me 2 or 3 years for that 4-year degree? And yes, you can do it that way. They'll
Okay.
give you an answer. I want to just correct one thing that I heard you say. You'll get a slightly larger salary. It's more like double, right? If you come out with a 4-year degree in this, because think about it. When you go through a degree program, they're making sure that your base knowledge covers all of the critical topics, all of them. And then the CISSP just tests that you know those things. If you try to learn it yourself, you might be really good in networking, but not good in encryption. Maybe identity and access management's a weakness. There are lots of different areas where you got to bone up your knowledge on. A degree just makes sure you cover everything in enough detail to validate that you have that foundational knowledge to then build on your specialty, right? So when you become a lawyer, you're not just a lawyer, you might specialize in something, which is postgraduate studies. A doctor is the same thing. You can become a doctor and you can be a GP, but you could also specialize in cardiac or, cancer treatment or whatever the case may be. That's the same in cybersecurity. You could specialize in forensics or identity and access management or data privacy. There's lots and lots of different subspecialties today.
Okay. And those are the domains, right, that you're
Hmm.
talking about.
Hmm.
So, one way or another, in order to get this designation, you will have to find exposure to the 10 domains,
Hmm.
and
And study them, yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
or have some experience.
Hmm.
Okay. So, what about certificates? When I was doing my research, there were tons of certificate programs that are a
Sure.
year or 2 years. And so, what have you seen in the industry, and is that a recommended route?
It certainly helps. So if you're not going to go down the university 4-year degree and you're not able to take this CISSP exam, there are other cybersecurity certificates that you can get. There's Microsoft Security Professional. There's AWS Security Professional. There is IAP. I think it's Identity and Access Management Professional. There's one there. There's one in privacy. There are a lot of different lower, like they're not less valuable. They're just less, there's fewer barriers to attaining them. And you still need subject matter expertise in those areas to be able to pass the test. But it's just like you're going to chew an elephant. You don't bite off the whole elephant. You take one small bite at a time. And the CISSP might be the whole elephant. What you're going to try and do is take off a little corner of cybersecurity knowledge and privacy and get a certificate there. Like I got a certificate in incident handling. That's very specific to managing cybersecurity incidents, to minimize damage, to speed recovery, to minimize the collateral damage, and really learn from it so you don't have that same mistake happen again. Those are all different areas that you can get certified in.
That's a domain, right?
Yeah.
Incident.
Incident handling is a specific domain.
Okay.
GIAC is a great organization, GIAC. If you go to their website, you'll see, I think it's giac.org, GIAC, but you could look at GIAC certifications and you'll see there's probably 4 dozen of them now, right? Pen testing, vulnerability scanning, privacy, all these different areas.
Yeah, pen testing is huge. Deal with that a lot. But okay, so it seems like the best route to go is university, because if you get a university degree, your fundamental understanding for firstly that exam are going to be much better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Rather than learning yourself, you're going to be spoon fed information, right? Rather than going around and looking and searching and learning by mistake, or entering the industry and just learning a very subset or 1 or 2 domains,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's going to really speed up that process as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
But
there are advantages and disadvantages to both, Umair.
yeah,
If you're just book smart, you don't have any practical experience, that's going to be a detriment. So if you're doing the university route, maybe get an internship at a company where you can practice what you're learning during off hours or on summer breaks, right? That gives you the benefit of both practical experience as well as the book experience, the book knowledge, right? If you're not doing a university, and there's plenty of really bright people that I've met that just university is not their thing, you need to make sure you're covering all the base domains. So look at the CISSP 10 domains and make sure that in your practical experience, you're learning those 10 different domains, right? Don't ignore any one of them because you want to be well-rounded. The best thing I can say about a cybersecurity professional is they're well-rounded. My degree of all things is in psychology. And it doesn't, at first blush, you might say that doesn't fit, but it actually fits perfectly because on the psychology of how people learn and what motivates them helps me meter out a cyber program at companies to convince people to learn certain skills, to put other technical protections in place, because if you know how people make mistakes, you can sort of argue that this technology is needed because, for example, people who have not adopted a password manager, I promise you, are reusing passwords everywhere they go. So if your company has not funded a password manager for all of your employees, me personally, I have 25 or 26 exposed accounts over the history of my personal email address. And I know that I don't have to worry about any of them because I use a password manager for 25 years. I know that every one of those account passwords that was exposed at LinkedIn or Dropbox or Yahoo was only ever used at LinkedIn, Dropbox, and Yahoo. And there's no prediction between this password and any other password I'm using because I don't even know my passwords anymore, Umair. The password manager just generates it for me. And when I go to the website, it sticks it in. So it's a performance, an efficiency, a security tool. And then if you're not doing that in your own company or yourself, you're reusing passwords. And then when it's a single website is exposed and they see what my email address is or your email address and your password, they can use it to log into your bank or your email or any other online account and cause all kinds of trouble. So I'm almost so far down this path, I forgot what my original point was, but the technology and the psychology of it, you can piece together to say, hey, we need to adopt a password manager because we know human nature can't memorize more than 4 complex passwords. And therefore, we're exposing ourselves enormously if we don't adopt that technology. So it's all part and parcel. You have to be well-rounded and you have to see the big picture of how many ways there are to get at this data and what we're trying to protect and then put countermeasures in place.
what's the norm in the field in terms of how are people entering the field today?
Well, they're entering it by accident because they're looking around for a job and they say, oh, okay, there's a well-paying SOC analyst job or there's, I've been asked to provision machines for my family, so I'm going to go provision machines at this company. And then over time, I've provisioned so many machines, I know how to do it in my sleep. Now I could probably do it a little more safely, securely. So you start to go down that cybersecurity path. That can be another way into cybersecurity field or a job in cybersecurity. But a lot of times today, unlike 25 years ago when I got started, it's going to school for it, saying, You had asked me what's another reason? What are some of the best reasons to go into cybersecurity? Well, it's difficult to outsource it, right? There's another reason why young people might want to go into cybersecurity because they can't outsource it to somewhere else in the world, right? The world is flat today, right? There's some books by Friedman that talk about that. You can do this podcast here and you could interview someone anywhere else in the world, or it's not a podcast, right? It's a video vlog, but you could interview anyone anywhere in the world.
It's a podcast too.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I know some people have a thing about that. So your enemies, your adversaries are in your living room, no matter where you go. If you're online, anyone anywhere in the world can attack you and you can do your job from anywhere in the world. So it's important for you to have those experiences to understand those risks, but they can't typically outsource it. If you go to work for a company here in the US, it doesn't matter, any company anywhere in the US, they're not going to outsource the cybersecurity role to somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. No different than law, right? You need to know the local law on privacy, on regulations versus what's in Germany or Australia and those sorts of things. So they want a local resource to be there, oftentimes on site, not always, but most often on site to look at, there's physical security. We haven't even talked about that, but there are physical security areas that need to be concerned with.
But don't you offer consulting services as a CISO to so many companies?
Yeah, so 40 different companies. They're all in the US because that's where we're stationed. Right? I could support someone in San Francisco, although they might want someone local because there's special legislation and laws in California around data privacy, the CCPA, California Consumer Protection Act. That's different from New York law on privacy. So there are some nuances there, particularly around privacy, but around forensics or protecting networks or best practices, they're all the same. Now, I don't think any company in the UK or Australia would hire me to be their CISO. Just doesn't cross international boundaries very well. And it's difficult to outsource. Unlike, say, development, right? If you're coding, writing software as a service for a SaaS platform, software as a service is what SaaS is. You can outsource that anywhere in the world. 25 years ago when I got into cybersecurity, there was a real big push to outsource that to lower cost development areas like India, Bangalore, or Pakistan, or the Philippines, or the Ukraine, and even in Eastern Europe. It's not easy. You can do that with development and code development, but you really can't do that with cybersecurity. So it's also a little bit of job security.
Yeah, that matters. And especially in a field that is growing and almost every company is going online. So based on my career detection skills, I think this is definitely one, which is a great career path that more people should probably consider because it's really interesting. So I follow a whole bunch of career YouTube guys. And I just, because of what I'm doing, I read a lot on what's going on in different careers. And even something like software engineering, right, which is a high level skill, right? AI is doing a lot of the work for them.
Yes.
Right. And it's coding at a pretty proficient level, right? Same thing with data science, right? And data science, so my wife is a data scientist. So we were just trying to mess around with ChatGPT and what it would do with like analyzing a particular query, right? And what its data analysis capabilities are. So it's like unbelievable how much it can accomplish, right? So it's pretty crazy. I feel like in all these fields, as you get more and more experience, you're going to become less and less replaceable because regardless of AI is going to be able to do a lot of the grunt work, but somebody's going to be needed to ask the right questions. Somebody's going to be needed to give the correct prompts, and you can't get that. Like, sure, you can do a lot of legal stuff, but do you really know what question to ask? Right. Do you know where the risk exposure are?
And you don't know when there's a hallucination. AI often hallucinates, and you've got to be able to know whether it's giving you correct answers or not. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to get back to some of the questions. In the field, is there career progression issues based on what path you take? So suppose I don't have any education. And the reason why I ask this is because in some fields, you might be able to enter right? But if you don't have a degree or some sort of certification, they won't put you into managerial roles. Your climb up the ladder is significantly harder. So, are there things in the cybersecurity professional route where people should be aware of that? Hey, you go down the undergraduate route, it's more likely that you will actually get chief roles, or
Hmm.
if you don't have any of that education, you're going to struggle.
Yes, there definitely are. And in fact, when you get up to the C-suite, right, Chief Information Security Officer, if you're targeting a Fortune 500 company, they're not just going to accept a CISSP with a 4-year degree. You might have to have an MBA because you need to understand business, right? You need to have business knowledge because when you're protecting data as a cyber, I've seen this many times. Cybersecurity professionals say, you got to do it this way, but this way costs way more money than what we can afford to do. So there's got to be a happy medium. You got to balance survivability of the company with spending money on all these different things to protect the data. So you have to be able to balance risk. It's not black and white. An MBA can help you understand the business needs. Another area that can limit your progression or your cap of where you're getting to is people skills. Soft skills are critical in cybersecurity because there's nothing that says this must be done, right? There are legal requirements that you might have to do in a business, but what is the requirement? HIPAA, for example, says protect patient data from disclosure. It says protect it. Well, how? It doesn't prescribe it, right? In law, you're prescribed certain things. You must comply with the laws to do X, Y, and Z. But in data security and cybersecurity, the prescriptions aren't all there. So you need people skills to convince management, IT, even people at the company to do minimum essential things like do your awareness training, do your fish testing. Don't ignore it. Why? Well, because it's important, but I don't care what you say. I'm not going to do it. I don't believe in this. Okay, so you have to be softer skilled to convince people. Well, when you personally had that email come into your inbox and you had a virus on your home computer, same thing could happen here. So it would be really helpful, and it's going to make you more efficient if you can spot these things just snap of your fingers and you say, yeah, I know exactly what to do. I look here, I look at this, I look at that, and then I know. These skills that we're trying to get you to learn are helpful personally, professionally. They protect the company. So you're using your soft skills to convince people to do the right thing. That's where my psychology degree is background really helps.
Mm,
Does that make sense? So I
yeah.
see people skills, technical skills, experience. Those are all things necessary to advance in cybersecurity. And then if you really want to go to the top, you need business skills like an MBA or things of that nature, which I don't actually have, but I founded my own company. I'm learning as I go.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
So I mean, this um, delves straight into what type of characteristics you would recommend. So you already, because I always ask what are characteristics that suit this profession, and
Hmm.
what type of if you lack these characteristics, where you should avoid this profession, right?
Yeah.
So you said that you need some soft skills,
Hmm.
obviously, to convey the cybersecurity risk and all the issues that come with that in the
Hmm.
field. What other skills? Let's not go to the Fortune 500. Let's just talk about individuals that are in the field regularly. What type of characteristics do you need to succeed in this field?
So I'll answer it, and then I think you're going to ask whether what wouldn't be a good candidate, who wouldn't be a good candidate for cybersecurity. So we'll get to that next. But in terms of skills you need, I mentioned the people skills. So good listening, project planning is a big part of this. You have to be able to take, how you're going to have 50 things to do, and you need to plan out what do I have to do first, second, 49th, and 50th, right? It literally is that complicated things. Also, you kind of need empathy. You need to understand what motivates people. You need to put yourself in their shoes because, the salesperson that has to get this sales closed on the 30th of the month is not going to do their security awareness training today. They are doing everything humanly possible to close their quota, to make their bonus, and go home to visit their family and kids. They're not going to do their training that day. So don't ask them to do it on the 30th. Ask them on the 1st to start for the next month to do it, right? Those kinds of things are very important. Technical skills, we talked a lot about those already. I won't rehash those, but you need technical skills. You could do the degree program, the self-taught. Experience really helps. And if you're in the SOC, that's just not enough, right? You might want to also do some penetration testing or vulnerability scanning on the other side of it, right? There's the defensive is the SOC, the defending against attacks. There's offensive skills, which are in like, let's go scan this network and see how we might get into the environment. There's another whole area that we haven't spoken about application security. Are there logic flaws in the login of this web page that allows me to put some database commands like drop table in the username, and then can I manipulate the application that way? That's a whole area of study called application security, and it's another area of pen testing. So you can get multiple fields, be a generalist, get lots of exposure. Those are some really valuable skills, I think, that would help anyone getting into, the average role and then building from there.
So good soft skills, good project management. And is it empathy or just like emotional intelligence in
That's
general?
probably better. Yeah.
Right?
Emotional intelligence covers more than empathy. That is the key.
Because I feel like you need project management is unique to particular professions. But I mean, soft skills is going to be a big issue because if you grew up with a smartphone, and almost everyone did, and everyone entering this field, soft skills are actually pretty tough. And so if you go out and speak to young kids, that's kind of an issue because they're so accustomed to just being on their phones, right? And I mean, it's not even just the young kids, even my generation, we all struggle with this.
Yeah.
And so I think soft skills is a big one. And emotional intelligence obviously those are the people that get ahead, right? Like if you go into any company, you see the people that are director level, management level, they have all these other skills, which they're just not technical, right? If you're just technically sound, you're probably not going to move up, right? So that's a good way. Before I move forward and ask you about some of the negative characteristics, I should probably expand on what the 10 domains of cybersecurity. Do you have a rough idea of? I know no.
I don't have them memorized. I can get them in a heartbeat, though.
Oh, okay. Because I mean that's important, right? These are the fields that you would want as a junior to find exposure in, right? And that way, when you write that exam, that good old 4-hour exam, you'll know at least where the gaps in your knowledge are.
Yep. I will tell you in a heartbeat. And I apologize for not having this memorized. But so the first domain is security and risk management, right? Can you do a risk assessment? Do you know where to look for gaps or security flaws or holes? We usually break them into physical, administrative, and technical risks, right? Then we measure those risks on impact. How bad would it be if it happened? Like a meteor hitting the Earth would be a huge impact to everybody on this planet. But then we measure it with probability. How likely is it to happen? A meteor hitting the Earth is very low likely. So the impact is huge, the probability is low, still amounts to a very, very small risk, right?
Yeah.
And so we do those kinds of things. Then we have in this list, we have asset security. So knowing what you have, your hardware assets, your software assets, that's a very big part of cybersecurity. And then you have architecture and engineering. So if you want to build a network, what's the best way to do it? They talk about segmentation, right? Just like the Titanic had these big walls to segment the hull if some iceberg breached it, they had a critical flaw. They didn't cap the hull. So the water came in and went over breached the walls, and then it sank the whole ship. In segmentation in networks, we do the same thing. If you get a virus in this segment, let's say it hits sales, all the people in sales might be impacted, but no one in development or in finance or in support should be impacted by that because the network should be self-contained and nothing should go between those networks because of segmentation. So that's another big part of engineering and architecture. Communications and network security. That was where I got started in firewalls, ports, and protocols, right? That's in building these networks. Then we have identity and access management, commonly called IAM. Who has the right access to the data? In healthcare, this is a big thing, right? There was a story once of a famous basketball player, I forget who, went to a hospital and his doctor and his nurse were treating him. But suddenly, some other nurse got fired. Why? Because she opened his record. She had access to anybody she had to look at because she had a business reason, because she was treating a patient. They didn't say, oh, you get this patient and you get that patient, and they controlled it with technical controls. It was discretionary controls, meaning if you weren't treating the patient, you weren't supposed to go look at their file. But because it was this famous person, the nurse said, I got to look at his file. Terminated. She had no business reason, or he had no business reason for looking at. That's identity and access management. Security assessment and testing is 6. So that's, validating and testing networks, testing applications, testing data protections. Security operations, that's where you get into the SOC, Security Operations Center, where you monitor networks, you monitor log files for attacks. Software development and security, that's secure software development, right? When you're writing code, you can write it insecurely, which, by the way, ChatGPT, I have no idea if it's writing good code or bad code. If it's writing, there's some programmers that are really tight and write very minimal lines of code to do the same thing that others write, spaghetti code, and you can't really follow the logic of their programming. It's really difficult. But software development is the 8th area. Governance and compliance, so GRC, governance, risk, and compliance is what we call that field. And that's being able to measure. This is where project management comes in as well. Measure risk, govern it, set mitigating controls in place, and check that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if you have a 1,000-person company and you're supposed to be checking that all the people that left the company in the last quarter are no longer have access, that's a control. Compliance comes and audits you to say, did you do the work and remove the accounts? They go to HR and say, tell me everyone that was terminated. Show me these names in this list. Oh my God, we forgot to remove 3 people. Oh, bad, bad, bad. And then finally is physical security, which I think I mentioned. So those are the 10 domains. And physical security is one where I struggled a little bit, because you have to know how many lumens of light need to be in your parking lot to provide enough safety and security for people going to their cars at night, during tax season, because people work till 1 a.m. and they're walking out to their car. Is it safe? How thick gauge steel needs to be in the fence to prevent people from cutting it with bolt cutters or whatever cutters to break past the barrier, right? All kinds of crazy stuff like that. So those are the 10 domains.
Wow. I mean, that gave a lot of, my head went into so many places there. That was cool because, so in the contract, we're always writing, you will have industry best practices with respect to information security. And then at a minimum, you will take physical, administrative, technical, and some other safeguards. And some companies really set those out, and they'll say at a minimum you need to have X, Y, and Z, and some companies don't. And so it's everything that you just said. It was just like, oh yeah, that's why that makes sense, right? And I was actually working on a contract, and it was really, it's funny you say this, it was to lights under the camera, so when people are walking by, it would just shine on them, and then they would kind of become aware. And then when it went, that was the service offering. But when you went to the information security requirements, there was a lot more that was actually added, what you were just discussing with respect to physical safeguards. So that's cool how it all connects. It's funny, I work on these contracts all the time, and you could never know everything.
No,
I know. It's just...
I couldn't remember the 10 domains.
Yeah. So now moving back to some of the characteristics that would suffer, what personality profile not go into this field?
I think the biggest one, and I spent some time thinking about this for you because you were good enough to provide me some questions. Anyone that doesn't like to be at a desk should not go into cybersecurity, because you're in front of not just one monitor, but I have 3 monitors at home. I've got this one for instant messaging. I've got the left one for email, and the middle one is for my video conferencing. I'm looking into the camera at people, and I'm at my desk 9, 10, sometimes more hours a day, managing my company, or before that, staring at the screen for incident indicators or email and project management. But you're always at a desk, you're always at a computer. At least now you can get stand-up desks like you have in the background here. You want to be, if you're an outdoorsy person and you need to be with the sun above you, it's it's probably not a good job for you, right? You might want to do Amazon deliveries and be in and out of a truck and, in the sun all day. So that's definitely one area. If you don't like people and you really want to be a lone wolf, that's probably not. Cybersecurity is all about working with other people and other teams. So that's another area where you might not want to go into cybersecurity. If you don't like computers, if you don't like data and email, those are definitely detriments to someone going into the field of cybersecurity. So if you're empathy is a great thing, but maybe you want to always talk to people across the room. You're not going to do that in cybersecurity necessarily. You might do it in boardrooms sometimes, but a lot of it is email communication where all those nuances of interpersonal, nonverbal communication are lost. So that might not be a good field for you if you really want to be looking eye to eye to someone all the time. Does that help?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I think those characteristics are very applicable to many professions that are like related to working in an office. And now with remote work, that's something that's happening a lot because pre-COVID days,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of conversations that used to take place in person took place via Zoom
Mm-hmm.
or Microsoft Teams or whatever. And but now all those conversations, even within the office, people will just Zoom call you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I have noticed that in just this last year, it's 2024 for whoever's watching. Just in 2024, I have began noticing that people are getting back to actually going to people's offices, having chit chats, conversations. And it was starting in 2023, but now it's full blown because a lot more people are actually coming back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
that's
businesses are mandating you have to be in the office 3 days a week.
yeah,
That's one of the most difficult things that companies are wrestling with because there are more jobs today where you can be remote, and people are recognizing that I might lose my best people who are talented enough to get the remote jobs and work from home. So it's a catch-22. You can mandate it, but you lose some really good people. Are you going to force that? Steve Jobs famously built his Cupertino headquarters and only put washrooms in the center of that whole circular dish so that you would have happenstance encounters with someone in engineering or someone in materials or someone in software support. And people would all have to, or the lunchroom, he wanted people to interact in person and talk to people, talk to each other, because there's a lot of secret benefits that can come from that.
yeah. I see that, and that really doesn't jive with today's generation, right? I think polls indicate that vast majority of people just want to do their job and go back home, or I mean, they're already at home,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't care as much for that part because I I don't know if it's actually that they don't care about the interpersonal aspect. I think it has more to do with the fact that, commuting and when you do the cost benefit analysis of commuting and then losing 2, 3 hours of your day as a result of that. And then you weigh that against that time could have been spent with a loved one or something of that nature. So,
Yeah, it's not to pass judgment. I think it's just because it makes financial and personal well-being sense if you can do your job from home sometimes. But I will give you this tip for anyone listening to this that wants to get into cybersecurity. I would not suggest you take any job in cybersecurity if you're just starting out that's remote. You want to be in the office. You want to be able to go, "Hey, Mar, look at this. Am I understanding this right? What's happening with this packet? The resets are coming in, and I'm not seeing the handshake, the three-way handshake." You'll have to study TCP to figure that out, but I want you to do that. You will lose so many opportunities to learn critical skills if you're not in the office. So take a job in the office, spend that time making relationships, ask people what they're doing, learn from them, and read something new every day. Those are two great tips for someone starting out.
yeah, that's I've heard that from multiple individuals over the podcast. They've all said, you're starting off, go into the office because I know for a fact because I got multiple jobs during COVID and contacting someone on Zoom to ask for help in comparison to just knocking on someone's door is very different.
Mhm.
And so it's much easier to get better at your job in person. It's much faster as well. So I would probably recommend that as well. But anyways, now that we've gone through all the characteristics, positive and negative, for this profession, what does a normal average day look like for a cybersecurity professional?
It's different across the roles. If you're in different roles, it depends on what you're doing. So I said, let me take you through one starting out role, like an intern, because we hired a couple of interns at CyberHoot to help us out. So a typical day in an intern's role at our company is reading a lot of email, responding to support inquiries via email in a timely fashion, using the best answers that we might have documented in a knowledge base somewhere and doing that. But they would also look at social media, right? We used our intern to draft social media posts, and then I would read them, make sure that it made sense, that it covered the right topics, that the recommendations for this risk or that risk were appropriate and just right, right? They could be wrong. Researching emerging threats. Every day, just today, Microsoft had a critical patch released yesterday for Outlook, where if you got a particular email attachment without doing much, it might compromise your computer. So I spent the morning on a flight here and last night researching, was there exploit code in the wild? That's a really key feature for vulnerability announcements that we use, because if there is exploit code, we have to drop everything and patch now. If we're not expecting exploit code for a few weeks, well, it gives us a little bit of breathing room to get the patches rolled out to all the systems, but we don't have to drop everything today, like this moment. So we were assessing that. And then I had a couple of my vCISO clients wanted to hear about it. So we talked to them and we told them, get those patches rolled out. It was privately reported. It's going to be a black hat presentation in August. So we've got time. There's nothing that's been publicly disclosed. So, those are some of the things that an intern at CyberHoot would do. They would be writing blog articles for review. They would be answering cybersecurity inquiries for support, or how do I do this or that in the application. They would be reading email, responding to it, and planning projects. I know that we have a big need at CyberHoot to have reviews on public-facing websites about from people that use our product, if they like it or not. And so our intern, it was a he at that time, when he saw a company that was really excited about our product and loved the support they got, he would reach out to them and say, hey, would you mind writing a G2 review or a Gartner or a Capterra or any of these different review websites? Because for us to be successful as a company, we need to grow with positive feedback, like your podcast, right? I will write a positive review on my interview experience for you if you need me to.
Please do.
Yeah, happy to. So those are the kinds of things that someone as in an intern role, which an intern is a great job for anyone that's going through a 4-year degree. Get out there, get into companies, do that internship, be willing to do anything from getting coffee in the morning to, staying late to learn and watch a security incident unfold. Don't interrupt and offer your own 2 cents because you don't have any experience, but just listen and watch what happens in an incident so you get exposure to these things. It's invaluable.
Mm. So, what about what a regular cybersecurity professional with some level of experience, like what
Mhm.
are they doing? And you don't need to get into the nitty gritty. Essentially, what I want to paint is, what does your day look like, right? If you're a regular in the field, right? So you told me that you're in front of a lot of monitors. You're going to be in person, communicating with lots of individuals. You'll be interacting with teams. So stuff like that. I want to know,
Sure.
what does Billy's day look like from when they enter the office to when they leave the office?
Right. So often in the beginning of the day, you're looking for any fires to put out, right? It could be a support fire. Depends on your role. Let's say you're, a mid-level employee, you're running projects. You probably have to do your project planning, right? You have to do some deep thinking time. You have to schedule time into your calendar that can't be booked by someone that wants a sales demo or wants a troubleshooting session. If you allow your calendar to be wide open, and everyone will book time, and you'll have no time to do your project work, right? Think of it like Dale Carnegie or Franklin Covey said, you have big rocks and little rocks. And if you had a bucket and you put all the little rocks in, you would have no space left for the big rocks to go in. And that's what happens to all of us in all of our jobs. So you start by putting the big rocks in, and then all the little rocks will fill in the crevices around the big rocks. And so you'll get all the little things done and your big rock. So what I mean by that is you'll have to have project time set aside to do, maybe you're trying to figure out how to do multi-language support in your application, and you're studying some chat GPT or AI articles and capabilities to auto-translate videos like we do at CyberHoot. That could be a project work. So you got some project time. You also have to have times for internal meetings. You're going to be sitting down with the team once a week, maybe a little more some cases. You probably want to limit that as much as possible. You're talking through all the different obligations that your company has to other critical support issues. Are there development things that have to happen to fix a bug that you've identified? You're documenting. You would document. You might be in a role where you would receive a report from a client and they said, hey, the product's not working in the right way here. I think there's a bug. And so it might not have anything to do with cybersecurity. It's just the interface was designed to do X and it's not doing that. It's doing Y. So you need to be good at documenting the evidence of that. It's not enough to say, oh, John and this company over here said, do we have a bug here? No, you got to reproduce it. And you have to be able to back up his claim or her claim to say it actually is a bug. They didn't just not know what they were doing and make a mistake. So a lot of the things in your role is just common sense, right? You're gonna have to do common sense things. So there's email communications, right? You've got to stay on top of email. I think yesterday I got 300 email messages I had to go through. That's why I was up till 11 o'clock before I could come fly to see you today. There's that. There is recognizing people in your company. It's always more difficult, I think, for people to say, hey, thanks for doing that, or that was well done. Make time to recognize when people help you out publicly and in person, rather than it's often our nature to complain about things. Oh, that didn't go right. That was a cluster F, and it didn't, like it's okay to commiserate with colleagues, but oftentimes if you want to get ahead in any profession, including cybersecurity, recognize when people help you out, recognize others for their contributions, take less credit than, maybe even what's deserved. Put the credit on others, and that'll benefit.
Well, I mean,
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Well, no, I think you wear lots of hats. So
as a CEO, it's difficult for me to say.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so what I was trying to actually get to, and I think you covered pieces of it, was what does someone's day look like? So I heard you obviously lots of email communication. You have to, and this is typical in most professions where you have to come and kind of assess what fires to put out. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you'll start your day, you'll see lots of emails, and then you'll pretty much go through, try to assess a degree of importance, and then you'll tackle what you can over the course of the day through email communication, contacting clients, having internal meetings, and then
a lot of Zoom meetings with other parties, right? It could be with someone on contracts wanting to review a contract. So you do a Zoom meeting and you do your edits to the document, then you review the track changes. Mm-hmm. It might be a demo of your product. Maybe you're in sales and you're demonstrating the product. So you might be on 4 or 5 Zoom calls a day with prospects, right? Or you're in post-sales support where you're having a Zoom call with clients trying to teach them how to use your product, right? Or how to respond to an incident. If you're in the SOC, you might be if you're in the SOC or you're even managing other people in cybersecurity, you might be having to call senior leaders to say, hey, we have an incident and we need you to jump on this Zoom call so we can triage the outcome of it and try to contain it, go through the incident handling process. So a lot of it is specific to the job you're in, but a lot of it is on Zoom calls today. And if you're in an office, it might be in a conference room having those conversations.
Yeah. What about those physical security audits, mm-hmm. right? Is that what a cybersecurity professional would do? Because, I remember, I deal with this a lot at the contract level. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that companies, like larger companies, demand on-site audits with respect to how security is handled? Like, do cybersecurity professionals go there and test these capabilities?
Sometimes we
Oh,
do.
okay.
I remember doing a physical walkthrough of a building, and I was asking, you go to the printer and you see, are there sensitive data printouts just left lying about? Is there a recycle bin on the floor that isn't locked, a lockbox? It's just probably a used paper box that they pulled reams of paper out and they're just putting it in there to be thrown out. Those are some physical security things that we see. But at this audit, I said, where do you keep your records after, when you archive them? Oh, we keep them in the basement. And so you go down there and there's a loading bay door that's wide open and none of these things are locked up. All the data, privileged information is just sitting there in boxes on shelves and it's not locked up. So that's a physical risk. Another time we were talking about accounting firms, and women and men had to leave the office late at night during tax season and go to the parking garage to get to their vehicle. And we just walked it from the building to the parking garage. There's a syringe on the sidewalk, and there's clearly junkies using, all manner of drugs here. What kind of video surveillance and lighting do you have to make it safe for people to go? And so what they did as a control there, they said, we hired a guard staff, and during the tax season, the guard would walk you to your car and go back to the office. So it was just things like that you don't think about. Another firm I worked in, they were in charge of abuse cases with families, and sometimes they would make a ruling where parents were unfit to manage their kids, to parent their kids, and they would take them and put them in foster care. And in those cases, they had to have really tight physical security to get into the building, because you might have a caseworker who took kids away from a parent who believes they're a good parent, but they're on drugs or something else. And they might return with a gun, for heaven's sake, and say, I want my kids back. You took them out, right? Like, there's a lot of different things. You have to develop programs to shelter in place. Cybersecurity is about risk management. Physical security is around all these avenues of risk that you might not otherwise think relate to data, but to your people. So you look at it that way.
Maybe I didn't articulate my question well, but that was great nonetheless, because you gave many good examples of physical security safeguards. What I was trying to get to was, in the scope of the cybersecurity professional's job, do they also conduct on-site audits? Because from on-site audits, I'm more concerned about the cyber aspect. Right. I know some of the larger companies, they actually want the ability to see how data is, like, if it's not up in AWS, some people also provide their own servers. And so how is my data actually being stored and things of that nature? And is that something that a cybersecurity professional does, or does somebody else do that?
In some cases, a cyber professional will do that. They'll go on site. One of our vCISOs just visited 2 sites of a company that has 7 sites. They're preparing for CMMC certification. And she had to go visit their sites to meet first with outside auditors who were helping them prepare, but secondly, to do an inspection on, any physical data that was at that site. How is it protected? I mentioned lock boxes. That's one thing, but locking your computer when you walk away for lunch is another area. Making sure the server room has locks on it, if there is still a server room, because you said, and it's quite common that all these data is stored in the cloud rather than on site now. But there's still printouts and things of that nature. And you really need to label documents appropriately. If it's got CUI, classified, uncontrolled information, I might have got that wrong. But you've got to make sure that the data that you have under your possession is protected in all forms, whether it's in transit, electronically, or printed out physically. So yes, sometimes some professionals that do auditing will have to go on site quite regularly.
Okay. I mean, it's definitely a concern at a law firm, right? Because we have so much confidential information. So we're given pretty comprehensive guidelines with respect to how information ought to be left out and stuff like that. But okay. So now that I know a little bit about the job, I should have asked you this significantly earlier, but tell me a little bit about CyberHoot and why you actually founded this independently. And I read online you're trying to increase cyber literacy skills.
Correct.
But I'm pretty sure that's very brief with respect to what you're actually doing.
Right.
So what's CyberHoot doing?
Well, CyberHoot is creating cyber literacy in people, right?
Okay.
That's our goal. Our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal, is to train 1 billion people in cyber literacy. Any job that you do today outside of physical labor, and even in some cases, physical labor do their job bookings with computers, requires a computer, requires the use of a calendar and email and all manner of computer usage to do their jobs. And you can graduate from any Ivy League school today with computer literacy, but zero cyber literacy. And what often happens, and this is what really caused me to found this company, is someone will get a new job. They'll be really excited. My first big job out of law school, and I'm going to work for company X, and put it on their social media profile. And then that day they sit down at their computer and the president sends them an email saying, you know what, thank you for coming. We're welcome here. We're really excited to have you. I have a special project for you. I need you to go buy gift cards for me. I don't want you to tell anybody because this is a surprise for all of our employees at the end of the quarter. Scratch the backs off, take pictures, send them to me so I can deliver them via email to all these companies. And don't tell anybody because this is a special project now. And the new user doesn't have the basic cyber skills, cyber literacy skills to see the sender wasn't even inside the company's domain. It came from external to the company. I did a security incident where I collected $26,000 in gift cards from an HR woman who had just started in the company a week prior or 3 weeks prior and spent 2 weeks getting gift cards for the president, scratching the backs off and sending them. It was a nightmare. And just the modicum of cyber literacy would have told her, this is not a good thing that you're doing. You should probably check with your superiors. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons I founded CyberHoot. And we also see across the industry some bad practices in trying to teach cyber literacy. I don't know if you have a dog, but I have a dog. And I go to the dog park with him, and I train him to do certain things, to sit and to stay when I'm out and about. I don't want him to get into traffic and cause problems, but I've trained him. And I train him with treats, which makes him happy. And he's excited to go to that dog park. But I look over at some other people, and they're training their dogs with shock collars. They've got a little remote, and when the dog makes a mistake, they zap him, and he stops doing what he was doing, but he's not enjoying it. The whole industry of cybersecurity kind of has a shock collar approach. It punishes people for doing the wrong thing. Phish testing is one of the key differences between CyberHoot and all of our competitors. We do it in a positive treat-based approach where we present end users with the knowledge they need to pass the test during the test. And we gamify it to incentivize them to grow their cyber literacy from level 1 to level 6 or 7 with, more and more defensive looking owls, because our logo's an owl.
This is the psychology aspect leaking
exactly,
in.
Exactly, it is. But it also makes it more fun for people. People don't mind doing the cyber hoots. Like they're turning it into a verb now. Did you hoot this month? Did you do your hoots? And that gives me great joy because we're filling a critical need, because no matter what job you do, if you're using a computer, if you're a knowledge worker, you're going to get social engineering, phishing emails. You're going to want to know how to easily, quickly, efficiently, and confidently identify the attacks and delete them. And just move on with your day. Mm-hmm. I see so many people that through the norm is attack phishing that gets sent to your email to test if you'll click on it and open it, and then go to the website that it has a link in it to, and maybe even enter your credentials. Then that's where you get the shock, right? You failed the test. Now you got to go to remediation class and watch some video to say, don't do this again. It could sink the whole ship if you click on these things because they're really bad. Our approach is to, rather than do it that way, tell you this is a phishing simulation. Our tests are hyper realistic. They're way better than anything else on the market. And by the way, did I mention that the rest of the market gives you 3 buckets of users for your company? 5% failed the test, right? They clicked. 25, 35% passed the test because they opened that email, that attack email, but they didn't click on anything, so they passed because they recognized it was a phish. But that leaves 50 or 60% of your users where you don't know anything about what they did. Did they get the email? Did they ignore it? Did they delete it? What happened? You have no metric. With CyberHoot, you get 100% metrics for every single person, because if you don't do the test, the phishing test, complete it, we remind you. And if you still don't, remind you again. If you still don't do it, we remind you when we copy your manager on that. And so guess what? People do the test right away so their manager hasn't got a nuisance email. So all kinds of little psychological tricks to make it more fun, easy, short, quick, entertaining. We never present the same video twice. We cover all manner of cyber literacy, but because we're doing that vCISO service for so many companies, 40 companies, we see the attacks. We read the materials on online on the Verizon data breach report to know, are there any trends happening in cybersecurity? Like we've talked about AI. We could do a whole episode in your podcast on AI, but all I have time to say is that AI is making these phishing attacks better, easier to pull off, more tricky to identify when you're under attack, because they can ingest your social media profile and say, create a phish just for you, Umar. And you really do want to click on it. And they're making it very believable. So it's making the attacks easier, more prevalent. AI is also writing some of the malware behind the scenes that if you do click, it's now got more devastating consequences. Like it can steal your authentication tokens, bypassing your password and your multi-factor authentication and getting the hacker right into your inbox of your email account or your bank account or anything else you're logged into at the moment you clicked. So these things, the attacks are getting more sophisticated, they're getting better. We have to be more cyber literate as a population. And truthfully, your company can be ahead of your competitors if you're taking the time to teach these cyber literacy skills to your employees, because you'll have less public embarrassment, you'll have fewer incidents, your engineering staff will have fewer nights and weekends spent recovering data from a ransomware event or a business email compromise. Your company will be much more smoothly run, your IT will run better if all of your users have these cyber literacy skills that we focus on and teach you at CyberHoot. So we're doing a service. It's a win-win-win for everybody. I love it.
I mean, I'm going to need it. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to hire people because this is becoming too much. And then I'm going to need some cyber literacy. I know I've worked at Capital One. I've worked at some big law firms. So
sure,
I've had to undergo some of the stuff that
you've had
you're
the
mentioning.
negative shot collar, did you
I've
click?
passed the phishing test.
That's good. That's great. You know what? That's fantastic that
yeah.
you did.
I mean,
love it.
but they are so good now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have that same exact, I guess it's intuition, right? Because I'm just like, something ain't right about this email,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know if I failed. Maybe, I'm probably jinxing myself. But to date, thankfully, that's not true. I think I did fail one. Right when I got into Capital One, I think I failed one of the phishing tests, and then I had to go through that extra training that you're talking about. But it was nice. I never felt like, thankfully, it was anything negative, or because in the beginning you have to do like 30 trainings anyways. When you're working for a big company, there's so many things you need to know. And but this sounds good. I will reach out to you with respect to that.
Love to help you out. Thanks.
I definitely need cybersecurity stuff because so many things you said today, I was just like, oh crap, I gotta do right. And
Yes.
This is the hard part about having a company, to be honest, because there's so many hats you have to wear, and when you don't wear that hat and you neglect it, then negative things happen. You're like,
Exactly.
should have done that.
Yeah.
And you can only say that in hindsight, right?
Benjamin Franklin said it best when he was talking 200 years ago or more about fire security. He said, if you do a few simple things in your house, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And he was talking about fire safety. But the reality is cybersecurity is very much the same thing.
Yeah.
You can spend, a few $1,000s training all your staff up and testing them and doing the CyberHoot with your employees and avoid a $50,000 incident or a wire transfer for $100,000 or $1 million going to gone.
So my dad was working at a company, and it was I believe it was a meat manufacturing company, and he's in QA and quality control, and they were given a ransom. I think it was $10 million, and then they negotiated down to $1 million or $2 million or something like that. And then I've heard this so many times. It's unbelievable. So it's not even like a remote issue. This happens quite a bit, right? And man, don't people have better things to do than ruin people's lives? But anyways, let's not go down
Starting
that route.
salary for a cybersecurity hacker on the dark web, I saw a couple were $750,000 a year. You know, if you could write malware code and ransomwares and be successful at it. I mean, if you want to be I can't swear on this podcast, can I?
No.
Okay. If you want to be a bad person, you'll edit it out.
I don't really care.
But I tell you what, just to your point, if you want to be a mean, nasty human being, you can make a lot of money. And that's why there's so many people getting into it. It's very lucrative. There's a lot of money to be made hacking other people. People are gullible. They believe that a lot of people are gullible. They believe that people are genuinely nice and good. I tend to believe that people I meet are nice and good until they prove me wrong, but I don't believe anything online. I don't believe. I protect myself, my identity, all that stuff everywhere I go.
Makes sense. Obviously, they make so much money out of it. But all right, let's get back to the profession. What's the stress level like? Like now that you're a seasoned CEO, it's a little different. But when you were in the profession and for the cybersecurity analyst today, what's the stress level like in the profession?
Well, it's low for most of the time. It gets, if you're stressful because you got 50 emails to respond to, that's one stressor. But when the problem occurs, when you have a breach or you have a confirmed incident, it can get pretty stressful. And when you have senior leaders like, what's going on? And they're yelling at you to get control of an incident, it can be very, very stressful. I find that some of my psychology background helps, though, because if I listen first to understand what people are trying to yell at me, and I tell them, I understand what you're saying. Here's what I hear you saying. Am I correct? And they say, yes. I say, well, unfortunately, I can't get you that answer until I do my research, right? I need to research what's going on. So it can get stressful during incidents. It can get stressful when you don't have the budget to spend money to mitigate things you know are going to be a problem, right? If you say, we need to buy a password manager and train every staff member here on its use so that we adopt it, so we get rid of that risk, and they say, there's no budget for that, that's stressful. Like, did I not make myself clear? Did I communicate it in a bad way? What am I missing in communicating the risk? Because again, it's one of those things, an ounce of prevention, and you're going to pay a pound of cure down the road if you don't mitigate this risk. So that can be stressful, is being able to communicate in ways that people hear and dealing with budgeting and things of that nature. Here's one. You're on call 24/7 if you're a vCISO, right? Every one of my companies that I support, and they have my phone number, those 40 companies. If there's a real nightmarish scenario happening, they're going to call me day or night on nights and weekends, and you have to respond to that. So that can be stressful.
Yeah. But that's later down the profession, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of falls into almost every profession, right? Like if you're like a CLO, CEO, any of the C guys
in the
right?
C-suite,
like,
right?
You kind of can't be a normal person. You're compensated accordingly, right?
Right.
So, but I'm more concerned about just your regular cybersecurity professional, right? Because I mean, I'm not doing the podcast for, the C-suite. They know how to get there, and I'm not helping them. So this is more just for individuals within the field. So it seems like what's stressing them out is obviously external pressures. But for the most part, you would say it's not that stressful when there's an actual fire. Putting that out,
yes,
it can get there.
And you have a lot of different characters that you have to deal with, right? If you're, let's say you're mid-level cybersecurity program development in a company, and you have to convince the Unix lead or the Windows lead or the networking lead that they have to stop their project rollout to go back and fix cybersecurity things, they're going to be madder than a hornet at you because they got a deadline they have to meet. And so it can be stressful dealing with other people when you're trying to convince them to put cybersecurity as a focus, even though it's not their primary responsibility. So that can be very stressful as well. So a lot of times you have those threats, you have those stressors. When the industry as a whole matures and suddenly the rules change, right? This happens in law, but it also happens in cybersecurity. we're about to see CMMC become a reality. And many companies out
What's
there,
CMMC?
I'm sorry, that's the cybersecurity maturity model. And it's mostly for defense contractors, many around this area. And it's putting teeth into the old NIST 800-171 controls. There's 110 controls that you have to meet to be compliant with the original security measures in defense contracting and under that NIST framework. Now, people were skirting it in different ways. There was lots of reasons why this happened, but they said now you have to certify that you meet those 110 controls. So it's putting everybody on a level playing field, because some companies said we're compliant but weren't. Others did the hard work and became compliant, and they cost more for their project and widgets and services than the companies that weren't spending the money and the time. So it was an uneven and unlevel playing field. And the whole industry as a whole was having security incidents far too much for the likings of the government and so on. So now they said everyone has to meet the controls. They have to say they're going to meet the controls, and they're going to be certified by an external third-party auditor that they meet or don't meet the controls. And it's about to happen this year. It's been in the works and been talked about for 5 or 6 years now. So all these companies are scrambling around trying to find resources to help them become compliant, right?
But they were compliant.
Yeah, but they were and they weren't. So that is a very big stressor for individuals who are being asked to help. What do you mean we're not compliant? You told us we were compliant. No, I told you had these gaps and you didn't want to spend money to do it. If you want me to go back, I can find the email. A lot of things you have to do is cover your ass in saying, I told you to deal with this risk and to fund the purchase of that password manager, and you refused. The budget wasn't there. It's not anybody's fault. It's just that's why we have this incident today, or why we're not going to be compliant.
I totally get everything that you're saying. It's funny stuff, but I mean, this is like a very normal thing. You know, there's budgets and you got to work within them, and things get overlooked, and just the reality of corporate wherever you live. But okay, do you feel after a while your job gets redundant in cybersecurity? Do you feel like every single client you're just dealing with the same stuff, or nah?
I think in some roles you will definitely stagnate and feel that way, right? If you start out as a SOC analyst and you're a SOC analyst 3 years after that, you're going to be pulling your hair out. It could be very, very painful in a long-term role. So that's why I say you have to keep learning and listening to what other people are doing and expose yourself to as much as possible. There are other roles that are always exciting. Like if you're doing forensics, you just never know what you're going to learn or see. It's going to be a different incident, and it's going to be super interesting each time you do it. So it really is hit or miss. There are some roles that are some cybersecurity roles that are just genuinely kind of boring, and I wouldn't want to do them. There are others that are exciting and change every day. So it really depends on what you find yourself doing at that time.
So what are some of these more? You said SOC analyst.
Yep.
What are some of the more? Is it more a matter of it's like gruntish work that you kind of need to do to get to the next level?
Yeah, oftentimes it is. Another big key area is in auditing, right? If you go work for Ernst & Young or Deloitte & Touche and you're the auditor, guess what? You're traveling 15, 20 trips a year to a client site to ask the same questions over and over, to hear the same answers. And then you ask for evidence of those answers. Yes, we're compliant. We remove accounts when the person leaves, and you get the evidence, and suddenly there's 7 people that are still in the AD or have active accounts that have long ago left the company. And you're like, now you have to bring it to talk about stressful, telling the client, look what we found. You said you were doing it, but you're not doing it. Now we have a finding. Every customer of that client, of that company, is now going to get a SOC report that says there was a material finding on account management. Oh boy, that's a stressful spot. But that could get boring, asking the same questions or traveling that much, right? So I see a lot of turnover in audit roles at those companies. It's hard to keep good auditors for a long period of time. Incident management is an exciting area, depending on who you are. I mean, incidents might not like it because you have to do it on nights and weekends. That's when incidents happen. They don't happen Tuesday at noon. They happen Friday on a long weekend at 4 p.m. Suddenly there's hackers in our network. There's files being encrypted. Oh my gosh. Why is this email account sending out 1,000 attachments every minute? because it's been breached and a hacker's sending out more attacks from your account. So those are the kinds of things. So I hope I'm answering that question. You have any follow-ups?
No, I mean, that was awesome because I mean, I got to see exactly what would happen. So incident management, that's funny. You wouldn't see, a lot of people have asked me, they're all like, Omer, why don't you shorten the podcast? And this is stuff that you can only get in long form, right? So I'm hoping over the course of time, as I build a more central repository and more people come and listen, they actually listen to the entire interview. If you're interested in a profession, I think watching one interview with this much inside information would help. That's what I'm thinking, at least. We'll see. Because that's stuff you can't really get. You know, you would have to spend a lot of time in the industry to find out that, hey, man, if you work this job on the and you want to have a weekend life, it's not going to happen with this. But anyway, that's cool. So this is one of the topics that a lot of people are interested in. How much does a cybersecurity professional earn? You mentioned that it's almost double or triple when you enter the field with a degree. So let's start off with a degree because you said that is somewhat more of the norm now.
Well, we'll go right from the beginning to, you know, where I am today, right? So initially we hired an intern at our company and we paid him $20 an hour. And that's actually pretty good for an intern role, but we had limited hours. And then he came to work for us after he got his degree, somewhere around $45,000 a year in his first year, and then we went up to 60 in his second year. But this was a crackerjack kid. This guy, I don't want to give his name, but he learned everything he could. He did every job we asked him to do, and then he was asking for more. He worked night and day, and all of a sudden he was gone. He got hired for 80 or 90K. He asked if we could match that, but within 3 years he was off making that somewhere else. But he had a degree. So within 3 years, that was pretty good. I know he just sat for his CISSP about a year ago and he got it. He said, oh man, that was tough. So you can start out as an internship making a pretty decent, you know, part-time job. Then you can move to 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, depending on the level of responsibility in the role you're taking. If you went to a degree, you might come out and get your first job at 60,000, 70, 80, depending on the area of expertise. And then as you become more of a generalist, because oftentimes when you, even with a degree, you specialize in one area, as you become a generalist, you get to be able, you get to go and move into a role that is more of like, let me look at all the risks that you face, not just the SOC analyst risks or the forensic risks or the incident management risks. You're going to look broadly at the program. Well, in those roles where you're sort of a manager of information security, you can get 120, 130, 150,000 with some experience, say 5, 6, 10 years experience. As you get into the C-suite, you're talking 250, 300,000 at some of the larger companies. And if you start your own company, all that goes away because you take what the company can afford. Yeah. I haven't been making much money for almost the last 10 years because every dollar I took as a salary was dollars that were taken away from the development and growth of our company. So be careful before you decide to start your own company. Now, in the long run, company might be worth millions. So, you know, we're in good shape, but it's that old story. I don't know if you know this, but in psychology, they talk about two types of kids. You put a cookie in front of the kid and you say, I'm going to leave the room. And if that cookie's still here when I get back, I'll give you 2 cookies. And what kids eat the cookie because they can't resist, and which ones leave the cookie because they're for the long-term benefits, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So cybersecurity is more of like, you can get a cookie along the way, and then as you grow, there's such a shortage that they're going to give you multiple cookies. You know, it can be very financially beneficial in cyber.
Yeah. Seems like it. Seems like a good profession for money because not all professions are like that, right? And there are caps. And so I know nursing is one where they really complain a lot about how much they get compensated because they feel underappreciated. Right.
There's huge demands, huge responsibilities, people's lives. And the same is true in teaching. Teachers are underpaid for what they have to put up with.
Yeah.
And then, you know, doctors, lawyers, they get paid well. Electricians, plumbers, they get paid well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, lawyers get paid well if they work in larger law firms. Like I know lots of lawyers that they don't get compensated well. And so they start their own things and then they start making a lot more money. Obviously not in the beginning, but as time progresses, they do. But yeah, I mean, that's also a good point to make with respect to starting your own company you don't see much. Like, for instance, I was actually I just finished a video on the step-by-step process, video podcasting. And I was just watching it and going through, I was like, holy crap, this thing costs a lot, right? People don't know. I'm probably going to do a video on that as well. But just starting a podcast is 10 plus K, right? A video podcast. And then on top of that, you don't make any money out of the podcast, right? So everyone's selling you this this huge dream after they've turned into a multimillionaire podcaster. But the truth is, that takes time. Like even Joe Rogan, I think he said Joe Rogan's the most successful podcaster, period. Right? I believe his Spotify deal was like 200 million or something like that. And nobody listened to his podcast for like the first 5 years, right? So the cookie example, right? Can you wait 5 years for 100 cookies? Right? But can you wait 5 years? Right?
So most people can't.
And
depending on where you are in your life, you can't really afford to do that.
Exactly. So, and then on top of that, you know, a lot of kids today, they're seeing the 100 cookies via TikTok, right? And so they're just like, yo, I'll start a TikTok channel, make a milli, and that's it, right? And life is good. And so, but if you look at the stats, the percentage of accounts that are generating that is very slim. Right. But
less than 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah, something like that.
1 out of 10,000.
I think with TikTok, it's actually pretty good, to be honest. It's really funny, but it's still a very, very small percentage. Right.
Yep.
But anyways, moving on. I'd like to know this. Are there any special perks once you actually enter this field? Because, you know, when you're not in the field, you don't know certain things, right? Like nurses work 3 days, right? Lawyers get, you know, competitive mortgage rates, all our legal licensure, payments are done typically by the firm or the company, or, you know, when you work in the government, you get, you know, special perks, and you can get free parking anywhere you go and stuff like that. What about cybersecurity? Are there any special perks?
If you're on the white hat side, which means you're the good guys, there's not a lot of special perks.
Okay.
If you're on the bad side, you get all kinds of special perks. That I shouldn't put that glamorous. You can go to jail pretty easily too.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you some personal stories. I play a lot of hockey, and I know a lot of folks that way. I got a couple of medical professional friends who I show up at their house and they'll take a look at my injury day or night of what they're doing. I'm not sure if that's related to cybersecurity, but the one in particular had a cybersecurity issue. And I did a house call to his house to look over his laptop and help him figure out a problem. And I did a quid pro quo essentially, because he'd look at my, you know, injury one time and help me out. So, you know, I think it's like just human condition, right? If someone helps you out, you help them out back. And I know a very specialized skill set. So we give our CyberHoot away to free for individuals. If you go to cyberhoot.com/individuals, you can get basic cyber literacy videos, 6 of them in one phishing simulation for free. So do that. But we try to, you know, I try to help out. My Rotary Club, where I'm a Rotarian in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I help them secure their Zoom meetings remotely during COVID, right? There are benefits that you can give back to your community for the skills that you learn. Like I knew how to set up the video conferencing then and do it so that, you know, some high school kids in Portsmouth couldn't Zoom bomb the Rotary meeting with some crazy bad stuff. So we set it up safely and securely. So there are benefits in the sense that you can help people do what they want. Like when we're finished, I might answer any questions you have about your security of your setup here. Those are the kinds of things. In terms of just getting special treatment, no, there's not really.
I mean, there's a lot of professions that don't have it. I just like to ask in case there's cool selling points for a profession that you wouldn't know unless you actually entered. One thing I learned, like accountants, outside of audit and tax season, they pretty much have a long weekend the entire year. Right? Because they work so much during that time. I mean, imagine having 8 months of 4-day weeks. Right. I know they're experimenting with that in Europe, I believe, but here in North America, that would be crazy. And they get to do that. So, I mean, to me, that's a perk. And so I'm looking for perks like that. But obviously, having a technical skill definitely helps. And I get that too. It's interesting in the legal field, the skill is very useless because when people call me a tech contract attorney, so unless you're a SaaS company or you're putting up, and especially in financial services, so I work so much with banks and grocery companies and stuff like that. So unless you're looking for some tech contract review, I can't help you much, right?
Right.
I'm kidding. I get people asking me for a whole bunch of random help, and I always tell them I can guide you. I can't, because you're not competent, right? I
Right.
mean, people think that just because you're an attorney, you know every single law, but I'll get myself in trouble if I start helping you further, right? And
Hmm.
so, but they don't get that part. But I have learned that I'm still more well suited to guide them, right? Because most people actually don't know what the next step is,
Right.
right? And we, at least being in the field, we can call a few people and connect them with the right resources. So having a technical skill helps from that perspective.
Right.
How busy are cybersecurity professionals? Like in a week, how many hours do you work? Is it like a regular 40-hour gig? And not CISOs. I want to know
Yeah. I
regular
won't tell you
cybersecurity
what I work.
professionals. Yeah.
I would say that it's personality dependent. There are some that clock in at 8, clock out at 5, take an hour lunch, take their 15-minute breaks, and that's who they are. Now, they will not climb any corporate ladder more quickly, because they're just managing their time to the letter of the contract. There are others that come in, be early, they leave late, and they're trying to learn as much as they can, and they'll help anybody out with any problems that they have. That's a way to climb the ladder and get more exposure and build your career more quickly. That's true in any profession.
Yeah.
You can limit it to the best of your ability. You could limit the amount of hours that you work. And you can't limit the number of commuting hours, because many cyber professionals have to be in the office every day. They can't work remote at all. Others can. In our vCISO work, we're helping companies all over the world through Zoom meetings every day. We don't go on site almost ever. But the majority of cybersecurity professionals that I've worked with have a pretty good work-life balance. It's nice from that perspective, with one exception. When there's an incident, you could be sitting at the Thanksgiving room dinner table and you get that call, we have an incident, and you got to excuse yourself and off you go. You have to do it. I have a lit up keyboard that I use because I didn't want to turn the lights on to wake myself up in the middle of the night when I was responding to a potential security breach in one of my roles early in my career. If I had the keyboard, I could type my password in, I could research the incident, and I could say, 9 out of 10 times, maybe even 19 out of 20 times, it was a false positive. Something alerted, but it was expected behavior. So I could go back to bed. If I had the keyboard, I wouldn't wake up to I wouldn't be wired and can't go back to sleep. Now it's 3 a.m. and I can't fall back asleep. So I think generally you can control that a fair amount.
But you would say, outside of incidents, do you have work-life balance?
I do.
Oh.
Yeah.
And not you.
Even me.
I don't want to talk to.
Me, I do.
I don't want to talk to a CEO of a company about work-life balance, right? Because that's like, you have to wear too many hats, right? This is like the scope of this episode is a cybersecurity professional, right? So as a cybersecurity professional, do they have work-life balance?
Generally, yes.
And so, like, you would say they work around 40-ish?
40-ish hours. You could take some hours. You might be. Yeah. I think a lot of it is how you train yourself, right? Because there are downtimes, no different than a tax accountant where they get the long weekends for 8 months. There are downtimes in cybersecurity where you could fill that time and work the 40 hours to your contract, or you could take off early on a Friday afternoon and maybe go golfing or something as a cybersecurity professional, because you're going to make it up definitely during the busy parts, or when there's crunch time on a project, or you have a deliverable, you might put in 45 or 50 hours. It's really individually dependent, but as a cyber professional, you can really control those hours pretty well.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, in the legal field, it's hilarious. We have I believe it's like unlimited PTO, but we have billable requirements. So it's like, yeah, sure, go ahead, take as much as you like, but a lot of things are tied. A lot of performance metrics are tied to how many hours you bill. So what do you like about being a cybersecurity professional?
Well, in my particular role and at CyberHoot, I like the fact that we basically open people's eyes to cyber literacy. It's not rocket science. If I could teach you all the basic cybersecurity skills, it's like learning to ride a bike. It might seem daunting and almost impossible when you get on that bike for the first time, but with a little practice, you get confident enough not to fall off the bike, or like with a password manager would be a great example. First week, people tell me, I hate you, Craig, for making me learn this password manager. It's so difficult. The second week, they'll say, "Ugh, it's not bad, but it is still painful." The third week, they'll say, Craig, I can't live without this. This thing is absolutely the best thing since sliced bread. I can't believe I spent 20 years in computers without a password manager. Almost to a person, that's the role that they go through. So I love seeing that light shine on, in their minds on some of the cyber literacy skills they learn, because I'm making their world a better place. I'm making their life easier in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
They become more efficient in their inbox at processing email instead of sweating it out and slowly trying to figure out, is this a real attack or not? And then eventually they forward it to IT because they don't know. And they take minutes of time to do that on a single email. And they might do that 20 times a week. So yeah, I can teach people to do delete and move on with their day in 3 seconds or less. And I feel really good about that. So from my perspective, helping others become more competent at basic cyber literacy skills is just a world of, it really makes me happy.
Well, you backed it up and you started a company on that. So I can see why you would love that. What do you dislike about the field? Not just like in terms of cybersecurity, what are some things that you wish were better in the field of cybersecurity?
I wish it was more mature. I think it's still an emerging field of study. I think it's a lot like medicine was 100 years ago, before, say, the Mayo Clinic and the Mayo doctors said, no, you have to have empirical evidence that this medicine cures this problem, right? Back in the day when there was alcohol in this tonic for toddlers to keep them from getting cranky, right? Oh my God, that's not right.
Got
So
a bunch
there's
of smash babies.
yeah, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen, and there's people and companies out there that are really misleading the public and the companies that are buying their products to say, oh, this is your silver bullet. This will solve your problem. All you need is X or Y. I think there needs to be more, maybe a little more regulation in cybersecurity, but I think there's also maturation in the industry as a whole. As a young cybersecurity professional, I think it's come a long way in 20 years. I don't think I would worry about that if you're just getting started today. But it's, as a 25, 30-year professional in this space, I'm saying my legacy project might be to make it more respectable that, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a cyber professional. They don't all equate, There's a lot of benefits that you derive as a doctor, as a lawyer in this world, I think a cyber professional has an equal benefit to society to those roles, or as an electrician or a plumber, to be frank. I don't think there's anything special about cybersecurity that sets it apart from those other fields.
Yeah.
A service field, the trades. You're creating benefit for people that no one else can do that job. So I think having it mature would be really good. Having people be more suspect of the silver bullets that are proposed out there, and until we get to a place where cyber literacy is on par with computer literacy, right? The ability to work a calendar, mouse, email, a keyboard, a computer. If we had cyber skills everywhere, then people would not fall for those snake oil salespeople doing things that are selling products that don't really deliver what they want. For example, here's a great example. In the insurance space, you can buy identity and credit monitoring services. You can pay lots of money to buy companies to monitor your credit and tell you when it goes awry. When in fact, what you want to do is lock your credit for everyone. So not even you can take out a loan in your name. Protects you from identity theft, protects you from credit theft of your information, because in all the breaches we've had recently, in recent years, there's enough data out there to steal our identities 10 times over. And so if you monitor it, that's like saying, I'm going to build my house, but I'm not going to put fire prevention or any fire alarms in my house because there's a fire station right across the street and they'll put out any fire that happens in my house. But guess what? When the fire started, it's too late. Your house burns down. They can put it out and prevent it from going to your neighbor's house, when what you ought to do is prevent it from starting in the first place. So if you freeze your credit, no one, not even you, can take out a loan in your name. And it's easy. You go to all the credit agencies, which if you search CyberHoot for freeze my credit, you'll see instructions on how to do that. And there's more than just 3 or 4 credit agencies. There's like a dozen of them now. But if you freeze your credit, you're not going to have your credit impinged by a hacker with the right data they've found on the dark web for you.
But then, can I still use credit cards? And
you can absolutely, because you've gotten approval to have that credit card based on your credit score. When you unlock your credit for them to measure your credit rating and risk, and then it locks immediately thereafter. So when you go to buy a car, you say, okay, where do you get your credit report? Well, we go to Experian. You go to your Experian account, you say, unfreeze my credit for the Ford dealership here for today, and then lock it afterwards. And then next week, when a hacker finds all your dark web data and tries to open up a credit account with nobody can without a credit score. So they say, I need your credit score. They can't get it. No one gets your credit score if it's locked. But if you monitor it, they can. And then suddenly they've opened up credit because they have your social security number, they have your date of birth, they have your address, they have your tax records for the last 3 years. They can open up a credit card account, a loan account. If you've ever interviewed, or if in the future you interview anyone in financial services and loan origination, ask them, tell me about the time someone came in to close on a home and suddenly there's another line of credit out in their name in a $20,000 loan that they didn't know about because of identity theft. Happens all the time. It's not talked about because it's embarrassing to the industry. But if they froze their credit, that would never happen. It's a sham. So I'm sorry to say this to all those credit monitoring agencies out there. And maybe there's some edge cases where credit monitoring is a good idea, but just freeze your credit, folks. Don't monitor it. It's like having that fire department across the road say, yeah, your house is on fire. We see it.
Well, I see it as a solution. I mean, I wasn't even aware of this, right? So I didn't know that you could do that. So, I mean,
that's what frustrates me about cybersecurity, is that there is a solution already in hand that most people don't know about. And if you did that, like mine's frozen. So,
all right. I mean, if you do it, there's got to be good reasons behind it.
Yeah.
Now that you have, 25 plus years of experience, the question was, what advice would you give to yourself when you started?
Okay.
But I don't want to ask that because the field has changed a lot.
Right.
Right. So with your 25 years of experience, if you were entering the field today, what advice would you give to yourself?
Follow your passion. It's that simple, man. There's so many different subspecialties in cybersecurity. If you're thinking, I need to do cyber because it's going to be job security, it's going to pay me well, but you might say, oh my God, I can't sit at a desk, monitor computers like a SOC analyst role. Sorry. Follow your passion. Try all kinds of different things. Do a little forensics, do incident management, do policy work, do privacy work, try everything so that A, you have well-roundedness, but then follow your passions. And guess what? You might find you're not passionate about cybersecurity. That's okay. You don't want to be in a job at a desk 20 years down the road saying, oh, why did I do this? I hate this job. Follow your passion. So this is good advice for anybody listening to any of your shows, right? Just follow your passions, because you'll find eventually. I'll use me as an example. I wanted to be a teacher because I did psychology. I know how people think. I know what motivates them to learn. I want to teach them. I want to understand the human condition. I was enrolled in teachers college 20 years ago when my kids were really little. And I said, salary, 1/3 of what I make today, and my career is on the upwards track. And this salary is never going to change. It's going to go up very, very slowly. And I have to get a PhD to make it go up. Like, oh my God, what did I do 10 years ago? I founded a learning management company to pair my love of computers, my love of my knowledge of cybersecurity with education. So I created my own company to do what I was passionate about, teaching people cyber literacy skills. And we're doing it in a way that people actually enjoy versus a lot of the other options on the market. So I followed my passion eventually while making good money along the way.
Mm. That is it's good advice, because I think sometimes, people just think that you can intertwine your passion into your profession later, right? I think
Hmm.
a lot of innovation in this world has come as a result of that,
Hmm.
right? So a lot of people think, because this is a major, major point of conversation that needs to be had. People are under the impression that once they actually go down a job, they'll have this really boring life and they'll hate it. And it's like, well, this is how society's kind of figured out how you're going to earn money. So don't feel like you're restricted. Use the system, right? Along the way, you'll learn skills and then employ them as you like,
Hmm.
right? And there's a lot of people that make that decision to stay within the field
Hmm.
and just, continue earning money because they're like, this is actually not that bad,
Hmm.
right? Or B, they take the skills and then they start their own companies and they intertwine their skills and passions. So I would agree. Now, I end off all my each episode by asking each guest, what is the best career advice that you have received?
Oh, I know you asked me that question. So here's how I prepared for that. I got out of my computer desk sitting at 3 monitors and I went in my easy chair, which is just next to it, and I lied back and I reminisced on this for a while because the advice was from a long, long time ago. I got advice to say, no matter what you're doing in life, in business and in personal life, try to find win-win scenarios.
Mm.
I see in politics in particular today a win-lose mentality. If we win, they have to lose. We can't win if they win. We can only win if someone else loses. And in nation state building, that's also true. But I think in everyday life, as in business, if you can find a win-win scenario, you're going to be successful. Let me give you an example from CyberHoot. We've built a product that is positive reinforcement and fun and educational all at the same time for the end user. So they win when companies adopt our product. But we've made it so the metrics are better, reporting on who has been trained, who hasn't been trained. The delivery is automated, it's passwordless, it's short. So the companies aren't wasting a lot of money spending it on their employees to teach them the cyber literacy. We're keeping it to a bare minimum essential. So the company wins. They get metrics on every employee passing that phishing test where they might not get those results in other products, leaving them exposed to attacks. But we didn't stop there. We sell through a channel of managed service providers and IT departments. So we've made it as automated as possible because everyone's busy. They don't have time to babysit and configure and administer a product to send out all these trainings manually. So we made 100% automated, even our phishing, which is not automatable. You can't automate attack phishing anywhere in the world. You've got to do all kinds of special things to punch holes in your security tools to get them to the inboxes to see if people will click. So our approach eliminates all of that. It's 100% automated. So the MSP benefits, or the IT department benefits, not only from the automation there, but because when you send out attack messages, you're burning goodwill with the end users. They're like mad at the IT department. Why'd they send this nasty email when I'm so busy? And now I've got to go do more training, which I don't have time for. So I hate that IT department. They're not helping me. They're hurting me. So we're doing it in a way that builds the knowledge without the negativity. So that's a win. And so when all those three things win, the end users and the company leadership and the IT department or MSP win, guess what? CyberHoot wins.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find those win-win scenarios, the results, the bounty will be much bigger than if you find win-lose. That's the honest truth.
That's great, great advice, because so I'm in contracts negotiations and we have to think about this all the time,
Yeah.
right? Because contracts are typically being negotiated through big companies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's always a big player. And so if you take a lot of big companies will take the tone that, hey, take it or leave it,
It's what it is.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you start getting down to a more reasonable companies, right? What I found is they'll ask you what your problem is. They'll go back and they'll give you a solution which works both ways,
Right.
right? And those contracts are so much fun to negotiate.
And they're win-win.
Yeah, because I mean they're objective, right? You're running a company here, and we both have stuff going on, and we can't just modify our entire infrastructure, right? So how do we come to this win-win situation? And some companies do that better than others. But number two, what is the worst career advice that you have received?
So the worst career advice was when I started CyberHoot that I should go and try and get outside venture funding for my company to help it grow. I couldn't grow quickly without that money. And I didn't take that. Well, first of all, at the time of CyberHoot, we didn't have good product market fit. And then as I met with venture capital companies that might be interested in investing in us, no one would. So we were getting turned down all the time. Then something magical happened. We got product market fit. We had a product that built positivity and people were loving it, and we were growing. And I started talking to some really honest people who looked at what we were doing and said, "You shouldn't take my money. You don't want to have to be, beholding to me telling you you have to change your business to make more money because we're investing money. We expect a return. And now you don't have your hands on the steering wheel anymore. We do. So don't take the money." And only really nice, kind human beings who were in venture who could have made a buck on us telling me that saved us from taking outside money that we didn't necessarily need because we're growing on our own. When you take money as a startup, if you're 3 startups in and you're good at it, then yes, you should take money potentially because you know how to do the dance and you know what is coming with it. But if you're brand new at this and you're just starting your first company, be really, really cautious about taking money from outside because you lose control of your company. You have to do things that might not be in the best interest of that win, 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 win. For example, we have no contract requirement for a 1-year agreement when a company comes to CyberHoot for our learning management platform. They can sign up for a month, get it for free, and they can go away. There's no contract that says you have to stick around for a year. Why? Because we feel it's so important to teach these skills that if you can't make our product work, you need to go find something else right away because you're a target if you have critical and sensitive data for hackers to monetize you in ways you don't want to be taken advantage of. So find somebody that works for you that you can make work because it's too important not to do it. And if we were owned by a venture capital firm, the way they measure success is how many contracts do you have? What's the lifetime value? And if it's month to month, that's a much smaller number than if it's 12 months minimum, right? And preferably 2 or 3 months, 12 months to 2 or 3 years are some of the contracts that our competitors are requiring people. I can't tell you how many times a competitor has come to us eventually said, "Hey, it's March, I'm talking to you. I can't sign your contract. We want your product, but I can't do it till October because we're locked in until then." I'm like, "Oh my God, we won't do that." But we would have to if we took outside money. So the best advice was those honest capitalists that said, or venture firms that said, "You're looking like you have enough standing on your own to grow, maybe not quite as fast, but you'll have 100% control of the steering wheel for your own company." So that was really nice advice that I received from not one, but a couple of people I met told me that, which I really appreciated.
But this was the worst career advice. So the worst career advice is you need capital.
You need capital.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And you can read lots of books that say, and you can listen to different podcasts that say, as a startup, you're only now.
It's contextual.
It's contextual, right? Because I had a vCISO services company that was its own self, and I was making $200K running those vCISOs. It was its own CyberHoot professional services, and then there was the SaaS platform, and it wasn't making as much money, and it wasn't going to be solvent if we didn't have an influx of cash. So it either had to come from there or it came from the consulting business. We combined the two, and it was a marriage made in heaven because what we developed met the security incidents we were facing in the field every day. We would see somebody clicked, so we knew phishing is a big deal. Business email compromise, wire transfer fraud, these other things. And so product market fit came to us through that marriage of in the trenches experiences combined with the product development and the funding that was brought to it. So in the end, it was a a match made in heaven. I wouldn't have do it differently any way, shape, or form. But we had the luxury of being able to continue to lose money for the first 3 or 4 years of our existence while we had this service revenue.
Yeah, you really are that kid that didn't eat the cookie.
I didn't eat the cookie. I haven't eaten a cookie in 10 years. Actually, that's not true. I just bought my first it's not first new car for me.
Yeah.
It's an 8-year-old Tesla.
Oh, nice.
So I bought that for myself just this week. But it's 8 years old, 64,000 miles on it. So it's not brand new, but to me, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, hey, congratulations, man. You keep putting money back into the business, right? So, I mean, it's interesting the advice that you give. So I was just reading, I believe the Lean Startup. I think it was Lean Startup.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric was talking about how when the audacity of zero is what he called it. The audacity of zero is it's better to ask for investment when you have nothing than when you have not that much revenue, right? Because zero invites imagination, whereas very little revenue or small revenue invites questions as to will there ever be any revenue? And so it's interesting that, and he also mentioned the things that you're talking about to an extent, once you actually get an investor involved, there's obligations. And somebody,
and rightfully so.
It's their money, right?
It's their money.
Yeah,
they have a right if they're going to put their hard-earned cash into your business. They have a right to question every decision you make. To have a seat at the table for decision making, to set the rules of engagement around contract length, and the risks that are money to be invested. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Craig, for coming in. Everyone go check out cyberhoot.com.
Thank you.
It's awesome. And I mean, I feel like I learned so much about the cybersecurity profession. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, coming over, and, giving so many, great tad bits of information to anybody that's trying to enter this field. Appreciate it.
Now, before you let me go, I'll give you one last thing.
All right.
And only for people that listen to this point in the podcast. If you sign up and you use the reference code MyCareerShop, right? That's your podcast.
Yep.
MyCareerShop will give you 20% off for the first year. I don't have that set up yet, but I'll have it set up by the time this airs. So use that reference code MyCareerShop and you'll get 20% discount on anything that you do in CyberHoot for that year, first year of your contract.
Well, I think I'll need it. So
that
code will work for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, Craig.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Well, that's it for this episode of the My Career Shop podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a better idea of how to become a cybersecurity professional and what to expect once you enter this field. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and comment on what professions you want me to invite next and what other information you would be interested in learning. See you soon.